What you doing, bub? It's okay. You don't know him. You don't know.
I hope all of you all had a very happy Thanksgiving. I know I did. I'm still full, but I'm going to try to get through this video now. Thanksgiving is a time to give thanks. It's a time to spend with family. And I always see people online. I see the movies. I see and hear people talking about how they dread Thanksgiving because they're going to have to be around family members they don't like. Or maybe some of their family members have different political views or live a different lifestyle and stuff like that. But I personally never had that problem. Don't get me wrong, not everyone in my family is alike, but for the most part, we get along and we love each other. So on Thanksgiving, when I get to see certain family members that I usually don't see throughout the year, I'm usually happy, but that's not the case with a lot of people. And believe it or not, there are some horror stories coming out of this year's Thanksgiving. And I figured there would be because, I mean, it's an election year. You got people still upset about the election and stuff like that. So I knew that there would be some tensions at the dinner table. But I was not expecting this story that's coming out of Memphis. It turns out a grandma, of all people, listen, grandma is the one that's supposed to keep the family together. Grandma is the core of the family. What would you call her? The matriarch? I don't know. Let me know down in the comments below. But grandma is who keeps everyone together, right? Well, apparently not for this family in Memphis, because in Memphis, during this Thanksgiving gathering, a grandma went off while arguing with her daughter, stabbed her daughter's son, the grandma's grandson, and then ran out of the house in the middle of Thanksgiving dinner. Now, I saw this story and I was extremely, extremely disappointed, flabbergasted. I was actually surprised because when I see any news story, I try to put myself in the shoes of the people who are living within that news story, you know what I mean? And I could never see my grandma doing something like this. In fact, I've met a lot of grandmas throughout my life. I was raised by my grandparents, so I was around their old friends. My mom worked at a nursing home, so I would be around older people there as well. And grandmas, older ladies, I've run into a couple that were mean, but for the most part, the sweetest people you will ever meet on planet Earth. And I can't imagine a sweet grandma just getting angry at Thanksgiving dinner and shanking her family members. Now, my question is, what led up to this attack? We're going to watch the news clip in a minute and we're going to learn more information. But my question is, what really led up to this attack? Was somebody, I don't know, criticizing grandma's cooking? Did you say something negative about the stuffing and then the knives just started swinging? You know, like, did you criticize her new recipe for mac and cheese and she just gets out the butcher knives and goes Kill Bill on the whole family? I'm really trying to figure out what's going on here. Because, you know, often in these news stories, you hear about, like in this example, you hear about the stabbing, but what led up to it? You hear about the disaster or the catastrophe or the crime, but you don't hear about what leads up to it. Now, I know this family was arguing, but what were they arguing about? What could you possibly say to your grandma that would make her pull out the shank and go full Shanksgiving? You know what I mean? Forget Thanksgiving. Grandma went full Shanksgiving. But before I go any further, let's go ahead and roll this news clip really quickly, and then I'll be right back with more.
A grandmother is behind bars after attacking family members on Thanksgiving Day in southwest Memphis. Good evening. I'm Mandy Rock. Daryl Green and Darcy Thomas have the evening off. This all happened on Delta Road around 3 this afternoon. Fox 13 Sierra Jordan breaks down the moments leading up to this incident.
Police say a grandmother stabbed 2 of her family members after a verbal argument happened inside their home on Delta Road. The neighbors I spoke with were shocked to find crime scene tape blocking off their street as they were celebrating Thanksgiving with their loved ones.
And it's just kind of unfortunate to have to go through this on Thanksgiving Day.
James Stevens and his family were enjoying their Thanksgiving Day meal until they were interrupted by the sound of sirens coming from outside.
And we come outside to see all the yellow tape around. Got the street blocked off down there.
Those sirens were police responding to an aggravated assault at a home on Delta Road just after 3 p.m. Police say a woman and her mother were arguing about various things, including the suspect pushing her son. Then police say the grandmother attacked her with a knife she got from the kitchen. The victim suffered abrasions to her left hand. Just moments later, the suspect then struck her grandson with a knife in his left hand near his thumb. That is when the grandmother ran away from the scene before officers arrived.
The violence around Memphis is still very high. It's just, you have to watch yourself on every corner and right here in our own home and neighborhoods. Family getting together, family, friends, feasting. Never this.
Now, Memphis police say the grandmother was heavily intoxicated and possibly drinking at the time of the incident. They say she is now in custody.
After watching that news clip, I'm still trying to figure out what's the real issue here. Is it the culture? Was grandmama standing on big business because she don't play that? Or is grandma mentally ill? They say, oh, she was drinking a little bit. Everyone drinks on Thanksgiving. And like I was just explaining earlier, I've been around my fair share of grandmas. And yeah, I've been around grandmas when they're drinking. And usually they get a little giggly. They might want to squeeze your cheeks, give you some freaking old unwrapped peppermints out of their pocketbook. But they're not pulling out shanks, stabbing you over turkey gravy and giblets. So, looking at this family, it's obviously extremely dysfunctional. One of the arguments that she was having is because grandma was walking around the house pushing the grandkids out the way. Well, maybe they shouldn't have been running around at the Thanksgiving dinner. But I think the funniest part is that after grandma shanks her own family, she runs away. And like I said, I try to place myself in the shoes. I'm trying to visualize this as if this happened in my family, and I can't. In my wildest imaginations and dreams, I can imagine and dream up the most craziest things, but I cannot ever imagine my sweet grandmother, God bless her soul, rest in peace. I could never imagine her shanking anyone in the family, let alone running away afterwards. And I look at this and I just ask, what's the real problem with people these days? You know what I mean? Like, what have we come to when we're now dealing with stuff like this? Grandmas shanking their grandkids over Thanksgiving dinner. And, you look at stuff like this and it feels like, damn, we can't sink much lower than this. Like, this has to be the lowest of lows. Listen, arguing at the Thanksgiving table, maybe someone walking out, that's one thing. I'm sure plenty of people experienced that this year. But not many people are going to experience grandma going full Jason Voorhees, Michael Myers on Thanksgiving, attacking the family. And my last theory is, maybe it's gotten to that point where grandma's cooking is starting to fall off a cliff. Listen, I know this is going to be hard for some of you all to accept, but there's levels to things, right? Grandma is always the best cook in the family. No one can cook like Grandma. No one can put together those recipes like Grandma. Now, she tries to teach other people, but nothing as good as Grandma's cooking. But eventually, Grandma gets older and older and older. And eventually it's harder for her to slave over the stove. And eventually your grandma's cooking falls off a little bit. You don't want to admit it, but the dressing doesn't taste as good as the last year. Maybe the turkey isn't as dry or as juicy, however you prefer, as it usually is. Things just start going down a little bit. Maybe this grandma's cooking was going down and her daughter was coming up to replace her as the cook for Thanksgiving, and she couldn't accept it. That's my last theory. But regardless of what your theory is, this is obviously unacceptable, and I wish that I didn't have to talk about a story like this a couple of days after Thanksgiving, but I think it's important to point it out because we need to point out things like this in our society so we could gradually move backwards. Usually, you want to progress, you want to move forward. But as far as things go like family values, we need to move backwards. We need to move back to a point where you weren't opening up the newspaper or turning on the news and hearing about grandma slicing up her family members on Thanksgiving. You know what I mean? So hopefully over the next few years, we can get back to that point where people actually value their family and you aren't seeing stories like this one. But for now, let me know your thoughts about this down below. While you're down there, hit that thumbs up, hit that subscribe, ring that notification bell, and I'll talk to you all very soon in the next one.